annual Mid-Year Chairman's Forum. The Chamber has been extremely busy working to drive economic competitiveness and provide the necessary information and resources to businesses during the pandemic. But before I briefly talk about our work, I want to remind you of the framework that anchors our initiatives. At the Greater Memphis Chamber, our primary goal is to drive economic competitiveness and provide economic growth for all. We focus our objectives toward this goal so we can grow our middle class and reduce our poverty rate. Now, as the lead agency charged with promoting and strengthening our city's business environment, we work in 4 key areas. We attract new business and investment and grow existing businesses. And that really is all about creating jobs by bringing in new businesses and growing the businesses that we already have here in the Memphis market. Even in the pandemic, Memphis remains on the radar of companies interested in relocating to Memphis. Since March, we've received 30 requests, count them, 30 requests for information from companies that are looking to possibly move to Memphis. Building a strong talent pipeline is another initiative that we implement, and that is about having a strong workforce that's prepared for current as well as future jobs in the marketplace. And soon Ben will talk a little bit about what those jobs look like and feel like and how they will be a little bit different from what they are now. We are also connecting the dots between business needs and secondary, technical, and higher education. Long overdue. And then the third piece of what we do is we work to strengthen the business climate. And that's about making sure that policies and infrastructure continue to support healthy business growth so that businesses can grow the jobs. We've been very active in collaborating with the city on the business grant program, hosting the normal business with Shelby County government. That was a normal business summit. And then sharing feedback with the city council on the face mask ordinance. So Bobby has been busy working away. We wrap up that work by telling and selling Memphis's business story to the world and promoting our market's many assets to companies locally and globally as a great place for businesses to grow and thrive. So promoting our central location is part of that pitch, our low cost of living, our world-class logistics infrastructure, and of course, our talent. Our work in the Upskill 901 space continues to engage champions who are committed to delivering trained talent. So in regards to COVID-19, the pandemic, the Chamber has certainly been a central resource for businesses since mid-February, and we have surveyed members to identify their needs, help to facilitate and interpret and simplify information coming from a wide variety of sources. We have on our website a COVID-19 business resource page that promotes businesses that are open, job openings. About 30 webinars and conference calls have been conducted, providing information on the federal stimulus program, health department updates, reopening information, and now the mask ordinance. We're also advising companies on ways in which to communicate to employees about what is currently taking place in America, specifically around the issues of racism and injustice. So that really is enough about our work. I want to say before we start with our chair and Benjamin Pring, if you have questions, please click on the information or the menu bar on your computer and submit a question, and we will certainly read it and hand those over to Ben for his response. So enough about our work. Let's now talk about those folks who have graciously agreed to support this program, our great sponsors, and they include, thank you, Memphis and Shelby County Airport Authority. Thank you, ALSAC, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And of course, we are grateful to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. Thanks as well and always to Waddell and Associates for hosting our Zoom platform today. Thank you, Lainey, and thank you, David Waddell. Now it is my special privilege to introduce a person that I've been hanging out with a little lately, our chairman of the board of directors, Mr. Willie Gregory.
Thank you, Beverly. You know, when I stood on stage in December in front of you guys and ladies and accepted the gavel from Richard, I knew that this volunteer job would keep me on my toes. But I'll say that it's safe to say that 2020 has had a lot more in store than I could have ever guessed when I agreed to be the chairman of the board of the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce. 2 pandemics. One is a social injustice and one is a medical piece. Are you kidding me? At the same time? But I'm also grateful that I am in this role during this most important and historic time. The leadership of our business community and our chamber team over the first part of 2020 has been truly, truly, truly inspiring. Local business leaders have come together to host webinars, provide resources to help businesses with their payroll protection plan. They've offered free advice to help business understand the legal hurdles that COVID has caused. They have also shared their best practice for safely reopening. This is a big thing in my mind because this is collaboration, not only amongst our city participants, but our businesses also. And you heard from me in December about the word collaboration, which is a word that you will hear me continually use for a number of years going forward. In addition, our business leaders have worked tirelessly together to offer candid advice to help local employees have difficult conversations with their teammates about diversity and inclusion during this time of social injustice and pandemic. And we've come together to make all of those sessions and resources available to as many of our local businesses as possible because we know that they need help in our regional businesses during this crisis. And we know that we need to save as many jobs and to do everything that we can to keep our economy strong as we come out of these crises. And speaking of keeping our economy strong, an important piece of news that may have been lost in the midst of these pandemics, the Chamber and their partners at EDGE together received an award for excellence in economic development from Site Selection magazine. So I think that we should graciously take that into consideration. In my first address to the Chamber last December, I said that I believed we had to have all of our ships sailing in the same direction, in which I still believe, and you will hear that coming from me numerous amounts of times going forward. But this is in order to build the future that we want to see for our region. And specifically, we certainly want to see it for our city. So I am proud of the ways we've worked together in these challenging times. Now more than ever, collaboration is a must. We must have collaboration with government, policy, we must have collaboration with education, and we must have collaborations with corporations. If we collaborate and all of our ships sail in the same direction, I think that we can continue to climb that mountain of making Memphis and the region around us a lot better. We will have to continue to work together to find our way out of these challenges that are before us now, but collaboration is the only way forward. And I ask you to get on this ship with me to continue to move our city and our region forward. Thank you, and back to our president.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman of the board. I appreciate that, and I believe I'm going to hear enough collaborations for the rest of this year to hold me for a lifetime, but I believe that that is the way that we need to go, certainly given the current operating environment. Now I am more than privileged to have an opportunity to introduce a gentleman that I heard back in May. And he was so compelling that I thought that our business community needed to hear from him. So we know what the pandemic has been all about, but what we don't know is what will happen from the business side once this pandemic is over. So I want you to meet Ben Pring, who is the head of thought leadership at Cognizant, and he co-founded and leads Cognizant Center for the Future of Work. He is a member of Cognizant's executive leadership team, and he sits on the advisory board of the Labor and Work Program at Harvard Law School. In 2018, Ben was a Bilderberg meeting participant and was named as one of 30 management thinkers to watch in 2020 by Thinkers 50. He was recently named a leading influencer on the future of work by Analytica. Ben is co-author of the best-selling and award-winning books, What to Do When Machines Do Everything, and Code Halos, How the Digital Lives of People, Things, and Organizations Are Changing the Rules of Business. And of course, his latest book is Monster, Taming the Machines That Rule Our Lives, Jobs, and Future. That will be out, in fact, this year. Ben's expertise in helping clients see around corners, think the unthinkable, and calculate the compound annual growth rate of unintended consequences has made him an internationally recognized expert on leading edge technology and its intersection with business and society. His work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Financial Times, London Times, BBC's Night News, PBS's News Hour, the Drucker Forum Report, Business Insider, Forbes Fortune, you name it, and including the Times of India, Quartz Inc., Axios, the Australian, and the Economic Times. He is clearly a global thought leader, and we are delighted to have him here. He is based near Boston, and he graduated with a degree in philosophy from Manchester University in the UK, where he grew up. So I'd like to now introduce to you Mr. Benjamin Pring. Ben, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Beverly. And I apologize for making you read through that long introduction. You did it very well. So thank you very much for that. And hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Is everybody hearing me okay? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. No, it's very nice to be with you. And Beverly and Willie, thank you so much for the invitation and to come and speak to folks today. I appreciate it. And I hope everyone in Memphis is doing well. Let me just pause here and I will share my screen. So hopefully you will be able to see my presentation that I'll walk through in the next half an hour or so. And then I'll pause and hopefully this may generate some questions, some thoughts, some observations that you'd like to throw into the hat, and we'll kick those around and see where we go from there. So obviously this is a crazy time. You don't need me to tell you that. And Willie, it was interesting your comments and your introduction around taking on the chairmanship at this moment and not having any sense of, what was going to hit you and hit us all in 2020. I guess when we celebrated the turn of the new year, 2019 into 2020, none of us had heard or seen this little thing before. This bug, this virus that has been floating around in the air. I hope not too close to you or your loved ones or your pals, but obviously something that has totally changed everything in our world, in our lives, in our business lives, in societies, in Memphis, in Massachusetts, where I live, in the UK, where I come from originally. This is, I think it's fair to say, probably the biggest existential challenge that we as a globe have faced probably since the Second World War. Something that has really upended business as usual, norms that we've sort of grown up with and lived with for a long period of time, and is forcing us all to sort of question what the future of our work, indeed the future of our lives, are going to be look like. And it's everything from the very big existential macro, as I said, to simple things as well. I mean, are we going to, in this period when this famous quote came to my mind, some of you may know this quote, that there are decades when nothing happens, and then weeks when decades happen. At this time when it feels like there are decades happening in weeks, so much is changing. Are we going to shake hands again? Some people are saying probably not. Are we going to work in offices like this again? That's questionable as well. Are we going to sit on a plane like that in the future? Warren Buffett obviously thinks not, having sold out of all his stocks in the major US airlines, and although people are beginning to travel again, I think a lot of people are very reluctant to put themselves in that kind of environment going forward. Certainly I am. I don't know about you, but this seems increasingly untenable. And again, just building on that thought, certainly in our world, the world of kind of business travel has been a big part of our lives for a long period of time, hasn't it? And kind of business travel has sort of been cool in a way, but now it's lost that cool entirely. And somebody, myself, who travels around the world going to conferences and speaking at events, you know, there's been an aspirational aspect to that, going to Australia or going to Europe or something. People have said, wow, what a great life you lead. But now I think people would probably pity somebody who had to get on a 15-hour flight to Sydney, Australia, and sit next to a complete stranger, or a transcontinental flight here in the US, 6 hours from LA to New York or whatever. I think that would be something that probably people didn't think was very cool anymore. And I think that's actually going to be one of the major things that we see in short order, this notion of kind of health screening when we go into an airport. If you cast your mind back to the terrible events of 9/11, almost 20 years ago now, what we saw in short order after that terrible day was the creation of the TSA, the Transportation Security Agency. And you think about how the flying experience was totally changed by that, and how an infrastructure was built around that process of traveling. I think we're going to see the same thing, not a TSA now, but an HSA, a health security agency, to go into the airport, to go into the plane, but not just that, to go into any building at all. A mall, an office block, perhaps over time, even into domestic buildings. There'll be a kind of a health screening, an airlock, if you like, on the side of a building, and you'll have to go through some temperature check. And over time, that will become more elaborate and more kind of scientific, if you like. And I think in time, we'll probably see that the budget that the TSA has, which is about $9 billion a year in the US, is probably dwarfed by the budget that we're going to see for this sort of agency that allows us to move around the world and not be held hostage to this bug, to this virus, because we clearly can't continue this lockdown indefinitely, and we can't clearly do this again. I think lots and lots of people are realizing that the extent of damage that's being done economically by the lockdown is vast and probably has been underestimated so far. So the next time something like this comes along, we're not going to be able to do this kind of lockdown, and having this type of infrastructure, health security infrastructure, I think is going to become a part of national security for the government here and governments all around the world. Another thing that we've seen as an element of this kind of build out of an infrastructure to allow us to move around safely is something we've talked about for a few months now that we expect to see, and I think we are seeing it, this notion of a clean regime, where we have a sense coming out of our homes, out of our caves, back into the real world, that, you know, that real world is pretty dirty, literally, and as an aside, perhaps metaphorically, and that we're going to have to kind of clean up our act, because we don't want to give the virus or the next virus, you know, the helping hand we've kind of given it. And I don't know, talking about flying, whether many of you are frequent flyers with United. I'm sure many of you are. You probably got an email from the CEO, I think it's a couple of weeks ago now, saying that United had teamed up with Clorox to create, in essence, a clean regime in the lounges, in the ticketing areas, and on the plane itself. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And again, building out that infrastructure is, you know, again, as an aside, going to be a real commercial opportunity for people in that world, and people who can differentiate their mall, their plane, their office on the grounds of cleanliness and it being a healthy environment to work or travel in. So all of this change, which has, you know, compressed, decades of change compressed into weeks, comes on top of incredible change that had been happening already, driven by waves of technology. And you may have seen this quote from the Prime Minister of Canada a couple of years ago, Justin Trudeau, who said the pace of change has never been this fast, but will never be this slow again. It's a kind of clever way of thinking about it, that we've all been sort of adapting and digitally transforming, if you're in that kind of world. And we've all been seeing the rise of the cloud and the rise of phones, smartphones and social media, a huge amount of change that we're trying to process and adapt to in a very short period of time. And now the pandemic comes along and it just takes it to another level. In the world I live in, I'm not sure how many of you kind of are in the tech world yourselves or work in businesses in that area, but you've probably been seeing this if you are in tech or on the fringes of tech, things like 5G, the next generation of cell-based technology for phones and communication, things like blockchain, things like quantum computing. If you're a real nerdy, techie Star Trek fan like me, you'll be kind of aware of what quantum computing means, potentially, the transition from the bit to the qubit, things like Dockers, Kubernetes, AI, et cetera, real kind of hardcore technology, which is changing, as Beverly said in the introduction of myself, that changing the rules of business, how we succeed, how we outperform. All of these technologies have been kind of changing our world very, very quickly. And at the heart of them has been this thing, AI, which we think here at Cognizant Center for the Future of Work is kind of the great story of our time, because what we're doing is making things we've dreamt of in science fiction stories and movies and books. We're making that dream real. And again, perhaps you realize and you see this and you're working in businesses where this is coming true, that the robots aren't coming, you know, they're already here. If you drive a modern car, it's basically made by robots. If you're talking to Siri or Alexa, you're talking to robots, you're talking to AI, you're talking to machine learning. And perhaps some of you have seen this little image of the robot here in the bottom left of the screen. This thing called Atlas, which is a real robot being produced by a company called Boston Dynamics, which, if you've seen these videos of Atlas and then Atlas's dog, Spot, maybe you've seen these videos recently. Spot was patrolling one of the parks in Singapore recently to maintain social distancing. It's an amazing video. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Spot the dog. But these things are things we've seen in movies, but they're real now. And this is sort of incredible. It's also something of a head fake in a way, because the real story of AI isn't so much these things, these physical robots, it's the software in our phones like Siri, or it's the software like this little thing called X.AI, which is a very cool software company in New York that has very, very sophisticated machine learning based software that can help you schedule a meeting. So rather than you and I, exchanging 20 emails to try and fix a time we can meet, the software will do all of that for you. And you can just say, Amy, which is the name of the software, you can just say to Amy, will you fix a meeting for me with Willie and Beverly at the first moment available? And so that, in a way, it isn't this kind of robotic science fiction, scary horror story that we sort of have in our minds about AI and this next generation of technology. It's just very smart, clever technology, which is going to help us do our work better, help us sort of take away the drudgery of, sending all those emails. But that's the real story of the change, which is seeping into every aspect of the work that people do around the world at the moment. And again, the notion of COVID is that everything that can move online is going to move online. And we think there's the opportunity to make things cheaper, faster, and higher quality in the process of doing that. Again, relate this to the notion of how we're meeting now on Zoom. And I don't have to get on a plane to come down to Memphis. We can meet like this. And of course, I'd love to come to Memphis. In fact, I was planning to bring my brother over from the UK for a vacation in Memphis in this recent April. We were going to go and see Graceland and the Stax Museum, and we had to cancel it because of the damn bug. So of course we want to be together, we want to travel, we want to have in-person experiences, but we're also going to leverage this kind of online world that we're accelerating into at the moment, in which COVID is sort of putting nitroglycerine on trends that have been bubbling up for a while, but put them right in the middle of everybody's radar, whether you're a senior executive in a big business, or whether you're running a relatively small, 2-person, 10-person business in downtown Memphis. These are the tools of the future, the opportunities of the future, to sort of build this technological infrastructure into what it is you do. And so at the Center for the Future of Work, this is what we talk about all the time, what we write about and analyze and sort of try and give a sense of what the future looks like. And this is a report that we put out last year about this time, called From and To. Everything you wanted to know, but were afraid to ask about the future of your work. And what's really interesting in thinking about this report, which covers 42 different ideas across a range of technologies, the tools, the way, the processes, the way we work, the aesthetic of work, what work looks like, sort of how it feels, is that a lot of these ideas, which were in the future a year ago, are right now bang in the present of work. They are the now of work, not the future of work. And that's extraordinary to see that acceleration, because some of these ideas were things that we thought would take 3, 5, 10 years to come into the mainstream. But now, because of COVID, are things that everybody, again, whether you're in a big business or a small business, kind of needs to be paying attention to. And so I'll just share a few of the ideas from this report, which you can find freely available up on our website at cognizant.com/future of work. Everything I'm going to talk to you about is all available up there as a resource for you if you're interested to download it and kind of look at it in a more leisurely pace and in more detail. But here's one of the ideas of the 42 that we shared in the report, again, from a technology perspective, the tools of work, was this idea that we are moving from the thumb to the voice. You know, because of the virus and because we're reluctant to touch things, because of this clean regime that I talked about earlier on, we're going to accelerate into this world, again, that we've seen in science fiction, but is becoming real, where we don't type and we don't use our thumbs on our phones. We literally just talk to technology. And technology becomes completely ambient and all around us. And so you don't need to fire up a screen, you don't need to fire up a computer, you don't need to even reach for your phone. You just talk like you're talking to Siri, like you're maybe talking to your car. And technology understands and responds to your voice. And again, this is something we've seen in movies for 1,000,000 years, but this is the next wave of application development. It's the next computing platform that every app in your business, whether it be Nike, whether it be Cognizant, whether it be the Chamber, is going to have in its portfolio going forward. So this is a huge change, which perhaps was 5 years out, but is now where the next wave of competitive advantage is going to be for businesses. I sometimes jokingly say, did you ever see Captain Kirk type? And of course he didn't. He just talked to technology, and Spock talked to technology. And that's really what the future of a lot of people's work is going to be like, just talking and developing the technology to allow people just to talk to technology. So that's a big change. This is another big change in this idea that we call the aesthetics of work, how work looks, how it feels, the kind of experiences we're having. And again, this is something we've been talking about for a little while, the transition from the suit to the hoodie. The idea that, people are wearing suits less, people are becoming more casual, and the hoodie in a way is the costume, the clothing of the software engineer, of the techies. They're the kind of archetypal techies, the people like this guy here wearing a hoodie. And again, some people in big businesses, perhaps conservative, cautious big businesses, sort of think, oh, well, that's crazy. They're just the tech guys. But it's really the software people, the engineers, who are increasingly in charge in many big businesses. And just as one example, Goldman Sachs, the big bank, big financial services institution, where you would imagine there are lots of people wearing those sort of that sort of Brooks Brothers suit. There are, in fact, far more hoodies in Goldman Sachs than there are suits, because perhaps you've heard this phrase before, software is eating the world. Software has eaten banking. It's now a technological industry. And so the people in charge in Goldman Sachs are people like that guy there in the hoodie. They come from a software background rather than a sort of traditional trading and financial services background. Even the CEO of Goldman Sachs is a part-time DJ, would you believe? DJ D Soul. And he, again, is the archetypal hoodie-wearing guy running one of the biggest financial services institutions in the world. Again, to us, this is a lead indicator of the way the world has been changing. But COVID, because we're all sort of working at home like this, is going to put these ideas from the fringe into the mainstream. And I don't think when we go back to offices that we're going to go back to that kind of suit traditional model. I think a lot of people have seen and experienced a different way of working, a different aesthetic of working, with kids running around in the background on a Zoom call. And we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle to sort of become all straight-laced and buttoned up again. This is a big, profound shift, I think, in the way that we're going to work in the future. And here's a couple of other thoughts just to round out before we get into some Q&A. Again, a very big issue that we've been talking about at the center for the future of work for a while is this notion of the trade-off that people have been making between the convenience of phones and technology and the way that we sort of interact with that, the way we sort of become cyborgs, if you like. And the fact that in doing that, we've sort of let go of any sense of privacy that we have. We've sort of seen privacy die because of our love and embrace of predominantly the phone and social media. But that in the last couple of years, the fight back to regain our privacy had been gathering steam. And again, those of you who work in big businesses, multinational businesses, you've probably heard about GDPR, legislation coming out of Europe to try and fight back and regain control of privacy. And that's now being mirrored and reflected and copied in places like California. We think, again, because of COVID, we're at this incredibly important and complicated moment in the evolution of our work and our lives where we're sort of thinking, well, these contact tracing apps make a lot of sense. They're going to help us deal with the virus, this one and the next one. But the question I have, and the question we sort of rhetorically try and frame for people to think about this is, okay, we may be healthy through the use of this technology, but at the end of it, are we going to be free? Are we going to be living in a surveillance-based economy, a surveillance-based world where we sort of are in that world George Orwell warned us about in 1984, where Big Brother is constantly watching us and we don't really have the freedoms that we as Americans, as British people, free people in the West, sort of expect that we should have? That's a big question. It's a big topic to take on, but it is, again, because of the virus, something that's really on the forefront, I think, of our minds, certainly here at the center. And I think it's important for business leaders in every type of business to think about, again, this trade-off and the upside and the downside, because I think there are some very real downsides in the use of this type of technology. And one final thought, we talk about the meaning of work, and we've obviously been seeing the kind of environmental agenda become more and more important in the last few years. And again, I think that the virus is showing us that the need to take our stewardship of the planet more seriously is very, very important. We've been shown as an unintended consequence what a reduction in greenhouse gases could do to our world. People in LA can see the Hollywood sign for the first time in a generation. People in northern India can see the Himalayas for the first time in a generation. Again, we've been shown a window of opportunity here. Hopefully, as we go back to the real world, as we travel again, we don't kind of close that and lose that opportunity, because again, that is one of the most important things that we've all got to grapple with as we look forward. So the From and To report, has really this sort of agenda, I think, for the future of our work. We're going to digitize more, but we've got to use that digital technology to extend and protect and maintain and develop our humanity. I don't want my kids to be taught by a robot teacher. I don't want to go to a robot doctor, but we want those people to use technology to create more human experiences and to bring more people into the technological driven opportunities that Willie and Beverly, you were talking about in your introduction. And we think that potential is very much there, that using these tools as we come out into the world, as we sanitize and as we prioritize the world that we want to build, how we build back better. Technology is going to be central to that opportunity. And that's why it's so important for us, I think, all individually, corporately, societally, have to be paying attention as the world is burning down, as the forest fire is sort of taking out a lot of the old trees, the big trees, the dead wood. If you follow my metaphor here, a lot of the kind of past of work is is burning down. And whilst that may be very scary and very painful and very difficult in the moment, we also know that it's the forest fire, if you like, that clears out that sort of old growth and allows the new growth to emerge, allows new sunlight to come in to the forest floor, new breezes to come through, new nutrients in the ground, to allow the new shoots, the green shoots of growth and recovery, to have a chance. And as metaphorical as that sounds, and as perhaps existential as that sound, I do think that that's the moment we're at now, where we have an opportunity to reset, to address the very, very important aspects of inclusion and diversity and opportunity that you talked about, Willie, at the top of the call, which are, again, existentially challenging and existentially important for us to address, for senior leaders in policy and politics, in business to address in material ways. I think this terrible moment of challenge and of the old world burning down, the one good thing that we can take out of it is the opportunity to address some of those challenges in a real way and build a future of work and a future that we all ultimately we want to see. So let me pause there, Beverly, and see if folks have got any reaction or thoughts or questions that I can perhaps offer an answer or a thought to.
Thanks so much, Ben. Really appreciated that presentation. I could listen to hear a bit more about it, but I know your time is going to be limited. So there are several questions, and one of them is, what are some initial actions you suggest businesses take as they think about either pivoting or adapting to this new environment?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think the way I've always looked at change, Beverly, is that people change and companies change and societies change from either a position of strength or a position of weakness. And if you think about a sort of bell curve distribution, what that means is that there's probably 5% of people, companies, societies that feel great. You know, they're on top of things. They're going to the gym every day. They're benching 300 pounds or whatever. And those people are always looking for the next edge. They're always looking for the change that can get them even to the next level. And I'm always reminded of, I don't know whether there are any tennis fans on the call, but you know, Roger Federer, who famously, even after winning 16 majors, changed his racket because he needed to get better to win more majors, and he has done that. And people kind of looked at that and thought that was crazy. You've got the winning formula, Roger, why are you changing? But he changed from a position of strength. The other end of that bell curve is people who have no choice but to change. They're on a burning platform. They're kind of going out of business. They're sort of becoming irrelevant or redundant. They've got to change. Of course, we know though that in that distribution, the vast majority of people are neither fantastically strong or fantastically weak. And I think that's the real part of this kind of equation that people, where people need to really act in a way that they perhaps haven't acted before, which is to embrace the future of whatever it is they do, rather than kind of try and protect the past of what it has been that has got them where they've gotten so far. And I'll give you just one little kind of very, very specific example, a clever idea, which I reference and tell people, because this takes some of my kind of big abstract philosophical thoughts and makes them very practical and very real for somebody who's asking this question. There's a guy called Andrew Ng, who is a well-known data scientist in the tech world, who has a training company called Udacity, which many people will be familiar with and are using to learn next generation, mainly technical skills. he said, and he said this a year or so ago, that anybody who works with spreadsheets, and I imagine most people on this call do some form of kind of spreadsheet work, reporting, or financial reporting, financial analysis. Anybody who's got that kind of level of skill that they're using in their day-to-day job could go onto his website and do a course in machine learning, which is the sort of technical word for AI that I talked about earlier on, do a 6-week course for free, evenings, weekends, on their own time, but for free. At the end of that 6 weeks, they could resign from their current job, brush up their resume, put it on LinkedIn, say that I am a financial reporting machine language specialist, and double their salary in the process. And I think what that's telling you is that embracing the future means what I call accepting that notion I talked about earlier on of X plus AI. And rather than that little company I talked about, what that means is X is whatever it is you do, whether you work for the Chamber, whether you work for Cognizant, whether you work for a sports clothing apparel manufacturer, take that X and inject the next level of technology into that job, that process, that task, that skill. And that's how you get to the next level of whatever it is you're doing. So I think a long answer to a very important but complicated question is that if you can embrace the future of your work, if you can embrace the technology that's going to drive that, and not go into this sort of pretend the future isn't happening, defensive posture, which is very human, very natural, particularly at moments of crisis, then I think you can edge towards that Federer end of the distribution curve, rather than be in that end of the distribution curve where really the future doesn't look so bright at all.
Awesome. That's great. Awesome. I have another question. Will the in-migration to cities trend continue, or will COVID push people out of more dense environments and into other areas?
Yeah, I think that's, again, a very, very interesting question. And I think there's probably a good news story in this for Memphis, because I do think that there's going to be a significant drain away from the tier 1 sort of mega cities, New York, LA, San Francisco, the Valley. I think you can see that. The data is telling us something pretty clear here. The number 1 U-Haul route in America, and has been for 3 years, is Sunnyvale, Silicon Valley to Sacramento. What that tells you is people are relocating, taking their lives to a place which isn't as crowded, which isn't as crazy expensive, where they can build a better future of their life as well as the future of their work. And I think that's gonna spread. I'm not saying that the big cities will collapse, that wouldn't be realistic, but I do think there's an opportunity to think about where you live, where you relocate. And your comments about businesses wanting to come to Memphis was super interesting. I think there is a big story going to happen in the next 5, 10, 20 years as we realize that because of this thing, because of the technology, we literally have the means of production in our hands now. And you don't need to go to the big city in the way you used to do to get access to capital, to technology, to those means of production. They're literally in the palm of your hand now. So I do think this is very interesting. And just as a little advertising moment, we have got a new report which will be coming out just after Labor Day, called 21 Places of the Future, where we've analyzed about 1,000 places around the world and created a methodology to identify 21 of those places where we think the future of work is going to emerge, at rapid pace, and where there's going to be tremendous opportunity. Now, I have to say, unfortunately, and you're gonna be upset and disappointed, Memphis didn't make the 21, but I think, you know, we could talk about that perhaps, and talk about how Memphis can, you know, inch up the ladder, if you like, because I do think there is a growing sense that, you know, cramming into a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn or into, you know, the Richmond in San Francisco and paying a fortune for it, we don't really need to do that so much. And I think there's an opportunity for opportunity to spread into parts of America, parts of the world where, you know, it hasn't been so far in this sort of fourth industrial revolution, in this digital revolution that people like I talk about. So it's a super interesting area to explore, and look out for our report, 21 Places of the Future.
Well, we may not be on the list now, but I bet you we make that list within a year or so. So you look for us on that list.
I hope so.
Yeah. Another question. In your opinion, and you talked a little bit about this, and this is a very interesting question. In your opinion, is domestic air travel on the way out or greatly minimized in the future?
Yeah, no, this is again one of the sort of big imponderables at the moment, isn't it? As I said, Warren Buffett doesn't believe there's much of a future there. I can't imagine that we go to a world where there is no air travel. I literally, that doesn't seem to me to be plausible. And clearly already a lot of people are beginning to travel again. I don't know whether you guys have been on a flight the last couple of weeks. I haven't. This is, for me, it's so weird because my job, you know, for a long time has involved a lot of travel. I haven't been at home for this length of time without a business trip in over 25 years. So it's very, very strange to me. But I do think that the appetite for travel is going to diminish somewhat. You know, it's not going to be 50%, it's probably going to be a quarter, 25% less traffic, certainly for the next couple of years, I think. The CEO of a big technology company called Schlumberger, that some people may know, put it quite well recently, where he said he doesn't think it's the end of business travel, but he thinks it's the end of the single visit business trip, i.e. that you jump on a plane just to have one meeting. And I think that's a good way of balancing it out. I mean, up until, you know, March, whenever the lockdown started, I would very typically fly to San Francisco for one meeting. I would sometimes fly to Hong Kong. I flew to Hong Kong for one meeting. And, you know, you sort of knew that was crazy, but it became very, very normalized in big business to do that. And I think that will probably change. Of course, there's lots of consequences of that, because business travel, very expensive business travel, subsidizes coach class travel. So I think we can expect to see the cost of regular traveling, flying for regular folks, probably increase quite significantly. And then, of course, that will have an impact. The elasticity of demand for flying will be tested, because the price will probably go up. So it's a big question, and I think, again, it's probably in reality, Beverly, going to be determined in the, you know, short to medium term by whether or not the virus, you know, comes back in the fall, or whether it, you know, is finally really fully suppressed in places like Arizona, where I see it's going through the roof at the moment, just as the president gets there. It's a very, very complicated issue.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. I've got a very practical question. What does this mean for salespeople, people that go out into communities and make pitches in the offices of businesses? You know, how do you see them kind of pivoting to make a living, if that indeed is a challenge?
Yeah, no, again, that's a great question, and something I'm thinking about a lot at the moment. And shall I tell you a funny story, a funny thought I had? Some of you all know the famous original movie and then the remake of a movie called The Jazz Singer. You know that movie? Barbara Streisand was in the 70s version, the original version. I think it's a little bit like that. There were some people in the silent movie generation who didn't make it into the talkies because they didn't have the skills required for the talkie era. And I can't help thinking that there's a parallel, a simile, if you like, that we're now moving into this screen-based era where I'm no longer on a big stage or a salesperson isn't in front of a client one-to-one, and there's a sort of stagecraft to that, there's theatrics to that, there's sales techniques in that physical interaction that need to sort of translate into this. And some people can present into this. I hope you think I've done a decent job. A lot of people can't. A lot of people find it difficult, like TV news readers, to look at the screen, look at the light the whole time when they're talking, particularly when they're thinking and talking. Like there, I just looked away because I'm thinking. A TV person has to look into the screen the whole time. So I think there's a new opportunity for people to differentiate themselves, salespeople, business people of all stripes, in this new screen age that we're in. And I think that's going to be an important element of sales training going forward, being able to, you know, have a presence, be able to sell through platforms like Zoom and WebEx and other ones, because I don't think that the notion that the traditional bag-carrying salesperson just knocking on doors and spending their life in airports going to meetings, I don't think that's going to come back that quickly.
Well, thank you. And one final question. You have a diverse range of business leaders on the phone, large businesses, small businesses. What are the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give these business leaders about what they should do now as they look to the future, this highly technological future? What should they do now?
Yeah. No, again, it's a great question. It's something we spend a lot of time talking about, thinking about. Again, it's hard to sort of pass that down into simple, quick ideas. A couple of thoughts though, Beverly. One is if you have comfort with numbers, if you're a numbers-based person, if you feel comfortable around numbers, I don't think there's been a better time to be alive, frankly, strong as that statement may sound, because so much of the world of technology, of finance, of medicine, of engineering requires you to be comfortable with numbers. So if you, as in mid-career, or your children, whoever you're thinking about, if you have an ability, skill, expertise with numbers, I think the world is your kind of lobster, your oyster at the moment. Of course, the reality is that cadre of the entire population is the minority. Most people aren't comfortable with numbers. I'm not particularly comfortable with numbers, to tell you the truth. And for us, the liberal art people, if you like, the people who can't kind of code, the people who can't do financial engineering, what we have to do is we have to double down on being good human beings, on service, on expressing our humanity, on being kind, on being creative, on being thoughtful, on being loving. It's those qualities that we as humans have that are going to become more and more important in a world where machines can do lots and lots of the boring rote work that some people have had to do. There isn't going to be that much demand. What there is going to be demand for is the teacher who can spend a lot of time with a kid and has good skills in dealing with people. Same for doctors, same for lawyers, same for all sorts of jobs, a car mechanic. It's going to be that bedside manner, if you like, if you know that phrase, that comes from being a good human being, kind and loving, all of those things, which have always been important, but we're going to be even more important in a world where machines can do everything, arguably one day. So I don't think necessarily that the non-math people need to despair, but I think the non-math people have to realize that ultimately, and you may know that this phrase, it may be the fourth industrial revolution that people talk about, but it's still a Barbara Streisand world. People still need people. And I think it's the people who can be good people. To me, that's a future I think that's important and will always be important.
We have been so totally informed about what the future of work looks like, and we appreciate that very much. We're grateful that you have come on board to share this evening those things that businesses need to consider as they either pivot or work to adapt to some of the things that you really talked about, and hopefully they'll go out and look at your reports and your presentations so we learn a lot more about what will be going on in the future, which, as you say, is now. I would also like to tell you that Memphis awaits your next visit. This is virtual, but we await your presence in person at some point in the near future. And I'm sure Scott Brockman would love for you to take a plane to get here to Memphis, Tennessee. So
I can't wait to get there. I'll look you up when I get there, Beverly.
Please do. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank all of you for your questions and being on board. And we will see what the Chamber has in store for you when we add our next thought leadership person to our agenda. So appreciate you, Ben. Look forward to keeping in touch through ACCE, Association of Chamber Executives. And we really enjoyed your discussion this evening. So we may be following up. Thanks much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.